Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22 Remote Style. That's Dave Matter and Gabe DeArmond, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us. Let's start with the number 12 ranked Missouri men's basketball team. 1-1 this week, which we said before on the show last week before this week, 1-1 would be pretty good. They win at Tennessee, number 6 Tennessee, 73-64, turn around on Tuesday and lose a tough one to Auburn. An Auburn team that's up and coming, I think, a little bit. 88-82. The Tigers are 10-3 overall, 4-3 in the SEC. But the win at Tennessee, Gabe, really gave Missouri a little bit of wiggle room, I would say, on Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean, you came into this week, back-to-back road games, just hoping to get one. And once you came out of that Tennessee game, I'm not going to say you were playing with house money, but second straight road game, they didn't even come home against an Auburn team it's not the Auburn team it was a month ago. It's much better than that. So, the win at Tennessee was it was like complete role reversal from the one in Columbia. I mean, in Columbia, Tennessee played really well. Missouri played terribly. And then down in Knoxville, Missouri played really well, but Tennessee was also awful. I mean, they had 9 turnovers in the first 10 minutes, and I think half of them didn't really have anything to do with Missouri. They just kind of kicked the ball around. And so it was complete role reversal and just another good lesson of like, hey guys, it's a long season. This happens to everybody. Sometimes it happens to one team against another team. And then they flip the script the next time out.
Tennessee looks like they're in a little bit of a lull to me, Dave. Like, okay, let's get through this. Let's get to the postseason. But I mean, if they're going to look like that, as Missouri, you have to take advantage.
Yeah, give credit to Missouri for not just playing really well, but capitalizing on a matchup when Tennessee just wasn't at its best. Now, they've come back and since won a game since then. It seems to be that kind of got out of their funk a little bit, but that's what a veteran team should do. They need to pounce on a wounded opponent, which Missouri did. Tennessee was missing Jaden Springer. It seemed to make a big difference. And they just weren't sharp at all, and Missouri was. And again, like, then you go to Auburn, and that's just a bad matchup for Missouri. I don't care what year it is. I know Missouri beat them last year, but the Tigers have only given up 80 points, I think, 5 times in the last 60 games, and 3 of those are against Auburn. It's just they've had trouble with their athleticism. Shot blocking has been a problem against them in the past, and it certainly was the other night. But the fact that you can split those 2 games, I think, is a net positive when you just consider the circumstances.
And after the Tennessee win, they rose in the rankings to number 12. Gabe, I think that's kind of where they belong, right?
Yeah, it seems about fair. I mean, I know Konzo was saying, hey, we're a top 10 team, and that's good for him, lobbying. And you can make an argument they're a top 10 team, but I saw a lot of people mad. I mean, you're 12th in the country. What are you mad about here? You haven't been ranked for 7 years. Maybe settle down. And also those rankings mean nothing come Selection Sunday, which is the only thing that I mean, we haven't been able to say this for a while, but that's the only thing that matters for this Missouri team is the NCAA tournament and where you're seated in it.
Yeah, no doubt. And we learned a little bit more about the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Drew Smith was the SEC Player of the Week. And the game in Auburn, Gabe said it last week. He said, you can't have Cooper take over. Well, even though he had 3 fouls in the first half, he took over, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Auburn wins by 6, but they were plus 20 when he was on the floor. I mean, you take him off the floor, Missouri was the better team almost every sequence, but they just couldn't get in front of him. He either made a great pass to his teammates, or he drew a foul, or he got the bucket himself. I mean, we haven't seen many guards like that who are so dynamic, especially when you consider he's only played 6 college games now and can score 28 points and is not a threat at all outside. He doesn't shoot threes very well. I don't know if he took many the other night at all, but he gets to the foul line. He's already earned the benefit of the doubt with the officials, and I know Missouri fans didn't like that, but it's the style and the way he plays. If Missouri had a guard that did that, Missouri fans would love him. He has that knack for initiating the contact, but making it seem like he's the one absorbing it, and that's a great skill to have, especially considering that was his 6th college game. So credit to him. Missouri just couldn't stay in front of him. And, when he's off the floor, it was a different game.
He was perfect for that Auburn offense. I mean, They're so long. They like to block shots, but they also like the alley-oop, and he throws it perfectly, Gabe.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only guy you could make an argument for besides him is the best player Missouri's played this year would probably be Io DeSunmo.
Yeah.
But they do it so many different ways, or such different ways. I mean, Io just scores and scores and scores, and Cooper scored a lot, but man, he's averaging 9 assists. And I had a lot of people say, well, they got to back off of him and make him give up he was giving up the ball, and he was finding dudes for wide open shots. I mean, he has the ball in his hand more than I would be willing to say probably any player in the country. And everything they do comes off of him. And Missouri just didn't have anybody that could defend him. And this might be a misread, but I thought Xavier Pinson got caught up a little bit in the trying to match him and trying to prove, hey, I can play with this other guy from Chicago. And there's no shame in not being able to play with Sharif Cooper.
And not only that, he was, and really a couple of the Missouri guys, Dave, had terrible shooting nights. And I wonder if it's because they're chasing him around all night.
Yeah, both Mark Smith and Pinson were 2 of 11. And both of those guys had times where they were guarding him. And I think it takes a lot out of you on one end. And then, like Gabe said, you're trying to match him on the other end, or just even doing your job on offense is hard enough when you're expending so much energy. And then it got to the point where that whistle blows and they're looking at the officials to see if it was another one on them. And by game's end, you had 3 of Missouri's starting guards had fouled out. So really tough matchup. And it's going to be for every team that plays Auburn from here on out. I mean, they've got Baylor on Saturday, and after that, they've got a really manageable stretch in the SEC where they can't play in the tournament this year. But I mean, that's a team that I could see really making a run to. They could have gotten one of the higher seeds in the SEC tournament for sure, even though they started off 0-4 in the conference.
Yeah, no doubt, because they play with high energy. Up next for Mizzou is a little step out of conference. You go and they'll host TCU on Saturday at 1:00. And then Kentucky is at Mizzou Arena on February 2nd. That's Tuesday. So a week before the season, you look at it and you go, well, maybe another 1-1 week, but this could be a week you could go 2-0, Gabe.
Yeah, just a ho-hum week. Missouri should win 2 games, right? In the Big 12 SEC Challenge in Kentucky. Look, I mean, I kept waiting and saying, well, Kentucky will figure it out. Kentucky ain't figuring it out, guys. They're not good. They're 5-10, I think. And last week against Alabama, played Alabama tough for like 35 minutes and then just collapsed in the last 5 minutes. And it sounds weird to say, but this is a game Missouri should win and needs to win. I mean, you lose that game at home, you're back in the situation where you're going, is this really a top 4 team in this league? I don't know. I mean, that's, at Auburn, that's fine. You can lose that game. But that's the type of game that teams like Missouri should win.
And what makes it bigger is you play Alabama right after. So you don't want to go into that game, feeling like, gosh, what went wrong here? You should have won that game. So yeah, it sets up for a huge week.
And Dave, there'll be juice for the Kentucky game just because it's Kentucky. Will there be any juice for TCU?
Nah, I'm not sure. I mean, if you look at TCU's record, it's not very good, but they've only lost to good teams. They don't have a bad loss, and they've beaten 2 teams that Missouri also beat, Liberty and Texas A&M. But they're going into now. They played Kansas tonight, the day we record this. But their last 3 games, they are getting beaten bad. I mean, we're talking like 30-point losses. Again, they're 2 really good teams in the Big 12, though, so it's kind of hard to measure. It's not like they're losing to Vanderbilt and Georgia. And Jamie Dixon's been out with COVID for a while too, so they went 16 games between games. So they're going to be coming off of a game Thursday, presumably that they'll play that game against Kansas. But this should not be a real tough matchup for Missouri, I wouldn't think.
So an interesting week coming up with TCU and then Kentucky. We mentioned the NCAA tournament, and some guidelines came out this week. Looks like if you're within 350 miles of Indianapolis, you're going to have to bus in. You have to take 3 buses. You're going to stay and really not do much in Indianapolis. It's going to be different. The thing that struck me right away was, wouldn't it be ironic if this is the year the Tigers make the Final Four?
Well, here's the thing to me, guys, is what are we going to do with these conference tournaments? Because I promise ESPN wants them played, right? But if you're Missouri, and we assume they're going to go into the conference tournament week fairly assured of an NCAA tournament spot, right? You know what you should do? You should leave your 4 best players at home and just go take a JV team and lose. I mean, because if they play these league tournaments as normal, there's going to be somebody that isn't able to play in the NCAA tournament because they went and hung out with 14 other teams and somebody got COVID. I mean, all it takes is one little domino to fall in Nashville and the SEC can't play. Like, not just Missouri, like a bunch of teams can't play in the NCAA tournament. I just don't think it's worth the risk. I know some coaches have brought up the possibility of like letting teams opt out, but what are you doing then if you have an SEC tournament where the top 5 seeds say, yeah, we don't want to play? I mean, so then what? The 9 seed wins the tournament and takes a bid away from some other league. The smart move is just to say the regular season champ gets an auto bid from every league in the country. And then if you want to put on a conference tournament, you can, but you do it at your own risk. I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll try to play, but I'm not sure it's the right move. And I'm really not sure it's the right move for teams like in spots like Missouri.
Yeah, it'll be risky, no doubt about it. And I would think, Dave, that, there's so much pomp and circumstance, and there's media, and there's shoot-arounds when you go to the NCAA tournament that none of the Missouri guys have ever been a part of. They're going to miss out on that because it's going to be practice, back to the hotel. You eat in the hotel. You have your own room. I mean, it's going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be boring, but it's going to be boring.
Yeah, it's going to be different. I think it is a shame if a guy like Drew Smith, who hasn't played in the NCAA tournament, this is his one chance, and it's not like it normally is. But they don't know any different, so it's not like they're going to be that disappointed. It's not like a team like Duke, who may not even make the tournament. So this is just a really different circumstances. All along, they've been saying the right things and doing the right things. They've had this veteran demeanor of a team of a bunch of older guys, so you'd expect them to handle that okay. I'm with Gabe. I think there's so much to be decided still with these conference tournaments. It's kind of like the bowl games where teams opted out because they realized they were meaningless. But the difference is there's still something after the conference tournaments, unlike the bowl games where, okay, we don't want to play in the Music City Bowl. We're just going to move on to next year. You can't do that with the conference tournaments because you still have something to play for. So they've got to get a handle on this pretty quickly. And I don't know if they will.
Let's talk about the women's basketball team. They played tough against number 8 Texas A&M on Sunday, but ultimately lost 70-66. The Tigers dropped to 5-5, 1-4 in the league. This is a team that continues to knock on the door, but can't break it open. And it's kind of getting to the point of how do you figure it out? They're there every time. They just can't get the win.
And there's no place on the schedule to point to and say, well, here you got a couple easy weeks, right? Not in the SEC, you never have an easy week. So, it's hard to see that team finishing 500 the way that the schedule sets up in the league they play in. And, obviously, I think Sophie and the Porter sisters get a little further in the rear view mirror every week.
Yeah, no question about it. Up next, Mizzou is at Florida tonight and then traveling to Kentucky on Sunday. It's 2 games where to me, Dave, they got to get one win at least.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, this reminds me of what Gary Pinkel used to say, winning's hard. And when you don't know how to win, it's hard to figure out how. They just seem like they keep finding ways to lose. And maybe all it will take is one where they can beat a quality team, not like when they beat Ole Miss a couple weeks ago. You beat somebody good and figure it out, and you build some confidence, and then you kind of have a roadmap on how to do it. But they just can't finish. And I'm sure it's frustrating for Robin, but when you this is kind of the cost of not having a lot of those non-conference games where they could have won those games, learned how to win, learned how to play together in a real game, and they just didn't have that luxury this year.
Especially with a new squad, I know there were some returnees, but you're still trying to put a lot of pieces together this year, and not having those early games where, they had to take the pause is really coming back to get them. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little football. The defensive coordinator is hired, so we didn't have, 16 tweets asking who the new defensive coordinator is going to be. But we'll talk about Steve Wilkes and much more when we come back on Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us as we zoom away here again. And let's talk a little football. Mizzou hired Steve Wilkes, the guy we talked about last week, as defensive coordinator, 25 years in coaching, 14 in the NFL. He was a head coach with Arizona, defensive coordinator experience. A pretty good hire and solid hire by Eli Drinkwitz, I think, Gabe.
Yeah, I think it looks good on the surface, checks all the boxes, experienced guys, not old, but has been around, an African-American guy, which I don't think necessarily hurts. And on the surface, again, it looks good. I mean, 3 years down the road, we'll see, if they give up 12 points a game, then everybody's going to say, well, why can't they give up 11, and we get mad at the coordinator. That's what we do. But ultimately I think it's, it's, can he go get guys and can he come through when he has to come through?
Dave, that was going to be my next question, is how can he transfer from the NFL back to college? Is that going to be a hard transition for him?
There's an adjustment for sure, because it's been 15 years since he was on a college staff. And I think the thing that he'll probably learn quickest or relearn is that you just don't have the time for football like you had in the NFL. You can't just spend all day on X's and O's and scheming and practicing, because you don't have employees. Technically, you have student athletes, and their time is limited. And then plus you have this whole other job that you don't have in the NFL, is recruiting. And now maybe as coordinator, they won't put as much on his plate as you do the position coaches, but he's going to have recruiting responsibilities for sure. And he's going to be involved in visits and selling his vision and selling Eli's vision. So it's a very different job. That doesn't mean he can't do it, though. So much of it's going to be about personality, his sales pitch, and then what he can teach these guys from what he has learned in the NFL. And I do think it's interesting, it's unconventional, but it could be really valuable that he sat out this past year and basically collected checks from the job that he lost in Cleveland, but he afforded the chance to sit and study offenses and study the trends in college and pro football that I think could only make him a better coach, next season.
And no doubt he's happy to have a job. Reports coming from Power Mizzou, Gabe, that Jethro Franklin will be the new D-line coach. Here's a guy that I think is going to be a big addition in Brick Haley's stead.
I mean, his name's Jethro. I like that. I'm on board. I feel like every SEC coach should have like a Billy Joe or a Jethro on the staff. So, he's been in the NFL a lot. He was in college. I mean, there are positives, right? A lot of people will say, well, hey, look at all the talent he's recruited. I mean, he did recruit that talent to USC and Miami. So, is he going to get the same players here? Probably not, if we're being honest. But, I think, I don't know. He's not Craig Kuligowski. We know that. So I assume some Missouri fans don't like the hire. I think in the end, again, assistant coaches, it's 95% can you get players. Like a defensive line coach, there's not some defensive line coach that knows this special move. Hey, no other team in the country does this. If we do this, we're going to get a lot more sacks. I mean, if that happened, the guy would, coach the Super Bowl champions every year. It's assistant coaches are mostly, can you go recruit and get guys?
And then can you coach them up a little bit when they get here? Yesterday, the 2021 schedule was announced, and Missouri, as I looked at it, has a pretty favorable start, has an open week a little bit before Halloween. And I would say that as SEC schedules go, it works out pretty well for the Tigers this year, Dave.
I'd say it's manageable. I had some fans say, man, this looks easy. I'm like, well, there's nothing easy about playing in the SEC. That Missouri had one easy game in 2020, Vanderbilt. Everything else was a 4-quarter game. So just because you beat Kentucky in 2020 doesn't mean going there in week 2 is suddenly easy, but manageable. Yes. You don't play Alabama. You don't play the eventual national champion or the reigning national champion, at least compared to the 2020 schedule. You get those non-conference games in there, which Eli didn't get last year, to kind of help build some confidence and put some things in so you can be ready for the SEC games. there's some unknowns. You got 3 new head coaches in SEC East schools. Josh Heupel at Tennessee for Missouri's first home SEC game. And then you've got an A&M team that's going to be top 10 probably in the nation. They were 4th coming out of last year. So it's backloaded, that's for sure. But, that first half is definitely manageable.
Spring ball is set for February 28th through March 26th, a time where if you guys get to go, Gabe, you might be able to learn a few things.
Yeah, I doubt we'll be able to. And you can tell Eli Drinkwitz hasn't been in Missouri very long, because I don't know what you call it on February 28th, but you sure don't call it spring football,
Right?
Because it's not going to be spring out there 4 weeks from tomorrow. So yeah, it'll. I don't know. I don't expect to learn a lot. We're not sure if there's going to be a spring game. I don't know. We could go off on a whole tangent. There's absolutely no reason we couldn't go stand on the sidelines and see some practices, right? But we probably won't be able to, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would imagine that. Speaking of indoors, they're trying to build that new indoor football facility. They got a $10 million gift right before we started taping this. And so they do their job and get some more money, but they're building it, at least building the base to get that thing built.
Yeah, and I think they've got till the end of the month till they have to show the curators the plans that they have as far as budget and location and all that good stuff. But this was on Eli's wish list before they even hired him. He wanted a new indoor facility with 100-yard field, because they don't have that right now. And I know the people that are really behind this would like this to be, really close to the south end zone facility, which would make all the sense in the world. I think it's less feasible over there because there's just not as much space. But I know that's his wish, and that's the curator's wish. So we'll see if they can get all the money they need for that.
You know who's bummed out Missouri's getting this facility is the punters. Because how many punts that were just terrible did we never know were terrible because they just banged off the ceiling after 9 yards?
And then you just said, that's good. Good one.
Good punt. Right. Would have gone 55.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, switching to wrestling, the number 6 wrestling team remaining perfect in the MAC, 46-0 over Ohio, beat Northern Illinois 24-12. They're now 9-0 and 3-0. 165-pound freshman Keegan O'Toole is the MAC Wrestler of the Week. Missouri was supposed to go to Kent State this Sunday. That has been postponed, mainly because there's COVID issues at Kent State, and by not going, it does save Missouri a lot of money on a bus trip to Kent State. And so they said, you know what, we'll take a week off in the middle. So they have a big duel. They have their last home duel against SIUE in a week, and then they're going to go to Oklahoma State, which is one that a lot of people have circled on the calendar. So that is coming up as well. But again, they just continue to move on. The 46-0 shutout was the largest shutout since a 45-0 win over Mo Valley back last year. So you can tell kind of how they're getting the bonus points, which is something Brian Smith is certainly stressing this year.
Well, can I ask you guys, what's the point of Missouri wrestling in the MAC? I mean, what are we doing here, right? They win it every year. There has to be some other. I mean, I know the Big 12's probably not taking them back, but this just seems kind of. It's just a bunch of practices until the NCAA tournament, it seems like.
I would think that they would want to get out of that as soon as possible. And, they're constantly looking, as long as it makes sense. And obviously the Big 12 would be the best to get back into. It's just a matter of will they take them back? No question.
Bill Self said no.
Yeah, Bill Self said no, even though they have no wrestling there. Number 20, gymnastics falls just short to number 12, Kentucky, losing 195.775 to 195.350. Again, this is another meet where we go to Dave, our gymnastics expert. They're over 195, and so it's a good score. It's just not good enough.
It's not good enough in this league, which means you're the 10th best team in the country or whatever they are right now. But keep plugging along, keep going for that magical 196. That's what Rob Drass always taught me. That's all I know.
One other sport that's coming back that not a lot of people know is volleyball. They have a spring season coming up. They had a great fall season, and now the spring, they have the second half of the season. And if I'm not mistaken, Dave, then they have the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's very strange, unorthodox how they did this, but this was all COVID related. And we forgot they were like one of the best teams in the country, one of the best teams they've ever had there. So we'll see. I mean, they could end up having maybe the best regular season of any Missouri team in this really odd year that it's been.
And they will return for the spring season this weekend against LSU. So we'll see how they do. Quick thought on the TCU game, Gabe. Can Missouri get the energy at home and win it?
I mean, they should. You know, TCU coming back off COVID pause and playing Kansas. I recommend Missouri's plan of coming off COVID pause and playing Texas A&M. I feel like, excuse me, I feel like that would give you a better chance to be good. But no, this is a game Missouri can't really lose. You know, and we continue the Big 12 SEC challenge where we give Missouri the least interesting matchups possible against former Big 12 teams.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, we'll talk about that and much more next week on Tiger Sidelines. For Brian and Matt behind the scenes, for Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks as always for watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22.